Hi, today I'm going to show you how server-side request forgery bugs are born, how to spot them on the code, and how to mitigate those vulnerabilities. Okay, so first of all, what is SSRF? Let's say that any user that wants to reach to our application and interact with it has to pass through a load balancer, then a front end, then a back end, and then the back end is going to reach for resources on the bucket or a database. The user cannot directly interact with the database, but one thing that he can do is to trick the backend to make a false request that was forged by him to a resource that he wasn't supposed to reach to, hence server-side request forgery. I'm going to show you a way in which this can happen. In our case, I'm not going to have a load balancer or a front-end and back-end divided application. I'm going to have a .NET MVC monolith, but you can understand the case. My app is supposed to fetch information from a certain bucket, and the malicious user is going to be able to trick the backend of my app to make requests to another bucket. So let's see how it works, and first let's go to our console and create the buckets. That's the first bucket. I'm going to create a bucket called IAPVM123 public files. I'm going to create a file and I'm going to copy it to my bucket. Then I'm going to create the second bucket just to simulate that my company has another bucket not related to my app. And I'm going to just create a simple file and store it in my bucket. This bucket is called IAPVM123 secret files, just to simulate another unrelated bucket. Now let's create our vulnerable app. I'll open my app on VS Code. And here I have it. The first thing that I'm going to do is that I'm going to add a NuGet package that is going to allow my app to interact with Google Buckets. All done. Now I'm going to go to my home controller. And in here, I'm just going to have an endpoint that is going to return the view of the index, this page, and a get endpoint for home fetch file that is going to fetch the file from my Google storage bucket. And as you can see, there's no validation, no security measurement of any kind. Now let me show you the index.cs HTML, which is a simple page that it's going to have a few buttons, and once I click on a button, I'm going to be able to fetch that endpoint on the home controller, and I'm going to be passing a bucket name and a file name on the URL query, and I'm going to retrieve the content of that file and I'm going to print it on the screen. On the root of my project, I'm going to create a Docker file. That's a simple Docker file that's going to allow me to Dockerize my app and deploy it to Google Cloud Run. I created a simple script that is going to Dockerize and deploy our app. I'm just going to run it. All done. That's my URL. Let me visit it. It seems that the app works. Let me fetch recipe 1. For some reason, it's not able to fetch the files from the bucket. I don't know what's going on, but I suspect that the service account that is running my Google Cloud Run doesn't have the necessary permissions. This account doesn't have the necessary permissions to reach for files in the bucket. So I'm going to give it permissions over my bucket. I'm going to run this command to give my service account the role of storage admin. Awesome. Now I'm going to redeploy my app. All right, I'm going to visit the new URL. Here I have my app. If I try to fetch a recipe, I get it. Now my app can read data from a bucket. But as you remember, I had a bucket that I want to fetch files from, and I had another bucket that I don't want the users to fetch files from. It is true that a malicious user would have to figure out the name of the other bucket. It is, but also remember that you have all of the time in the world to figure this out, and you have to move on with your tickets and your development, and there's a lot of things that you have to do, and their job is just to figure out the name. Once I try to fetch from secret files, I can read a file from a bucket that I should not have access to. Why did it happen? Two reasons. One, the service account running my Cloud Run app has too many permissions. I didn't apply the principle of least privilege. And second, I have a code vulnerability. On my home controller, I'm simply allowing the users to fetch whatever information they want. And I'm not verifying whatever those requests are legit or not. So we spotted the vulnerability, now let's fix it. We can fix it in two ways. First, let's go back to our console, and I'm gonna limit the permissions of my service account. I'm gonna remove the role of storage admin over the service account, and then I'm gonna give it the role of object viewer only on the bucket that it's supposed to fetch files from. And that's how I apply the principle of least privilege on my IAM accounts. Now let's fix the code. I want to have a whitelist of allowed buckets. And if a request is made to a bucket that is not on my whitelist of allowed buckets, I want to return immediately a not found and not move on with my code. After applying the principle of least privilege on my IAM account, I'm now on the code level validating user input. I'm gonna deploy this new code. All done, and here I have my URL. All good. Let me try to fetch recipe 1. And it works because I do have permissions over that bucket. If I try to fetch files from another bucket, I get a 404. That makes it even harder for a malicious user to enumerate what buckets do I have, because he's gonna get a 404 for any bucket that may exist, but his app doesn't have access to. So again, on our code, we have to validate user input and return a 404 whenever someone tries to do something fishy. And on our cloud environment, we have to apply the principle of least privilege on our service accounts. And that's how you can mitigate and fix server-side request forgery vulnerabilities.